The girl's scream died in her throat as crimson tears fell from the immortal's eyes, splashing like rubies against the cobblestone floor. She had never seen a vampire weep blood before, especially not one who had just slaughtered 12 men to rescue her from the auction block. His ancient hands trembled as they reached toward her face, stopping just short of touching her. "Impossible," he whispered, his voice cracking with centuries of grief. "You have her eyes. Exactly her eyes." Wait, before the next revelation happens, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. Elisabetta backed away, her thin cotton dress smeared with the blood of the slavers who had captured her 3 days prior. The auction house in Venice's hidden district lay in ruins around them, bodies of wealthy merchants and nobles strewn across the floor like discarded dolls. Only minutes before, they had been bidding on her unusual features, as if she were livestock. Now they were cooling corpses. The vampire before her was unlike anything from the warnings whispered in her village. Tall and aristocratic, dressed in outdated finery from perhaps a century past, he appeared almost human, save for the blood tears that continued to track down his pale cheeks. His dark hair was swept back from a face that might have been carved by Renaissance masters, beautiful, sorrowful, and terrifying all at once. "Who are you?" Elisabetta managed, her voice barely audible even in the sudden silence of the auction house. The vampire seemed to compose himself, wiping the blood from his face with a handkerchief of fine silk. "Vittorio Salvatore di Monte Carlo," he said, with formal dignity that belied the massacre surrounding them. "And you have the eyes of my wife, dead these 400 years." Elisabetta's heart hammered against her ribs. "I am no one's wife. My name is Elisabetta Conti, daughter of a tanner from Firenze." She tried to sound brave, but fear made her voice quiver. "If you've saved me only to claim me yourself, I would rather have taken my chances with the merchants." A ghost of a smile touched Vittorio's lips. "I have no intention of claiming you, child, but those eyes—" He shook his head. "The exact shade of amber, with flecks of gold near the pupil. In 4 centuries, I have never seen their like again." The distant sound of the city guard's whistles cut through the night air. Vittorio's head snapped toward the door. "They will kill you when they find this," Elisabetta said, gesturing to the carnage. "They can try," Vittorio replied, with the casual confidence of one who had faced mortal threats for centuries and remained standing. "But they will certainly kill you for association with me and for escaping your intended purpose." His expression darkened. "The men who rule this city are no better than these carrion I've dispatched. They simply hide their depravities behind laws and tradition." Elisabetta considered her options quickly. Death at the hands of the guards, or whatever fate awaited her with this blood-weeping vampire who saw another woman's eyes when he looked at her. "What do you propose?" she asked, straightening her back with what dignity she could muster. "A proposition, nothing more." Vittorio extended his hand, careful not to touch her. "Come to my estate. You will have sanctuary there, your own chambers, protection, and no obligations. When you decide where you wish to go next, I will provide you the means. And in return?" Vittorio's expression was unreadable. "Allow me to commission a portrait of you. A single painting, nothing more." Elisabetta narrowed her eyes. "A painting? Of just my eyes, you mean?" "Of all of you," he said softly. "You are not her. I know this. But for reasons I cannot fully explain, I must preserve your likeness." The whistles grew closer. Decisions had to be made. "Swear it," Elisabetta demanded. Swear you will not harm me or feed from me." "On my eternal soul, what remains of it." Vittorio placed his hand over his heart. "You will come to no harm under my protection." The grand doors of the auction house splintered as the guards began to break through. With no further time for negotiation, Elisabetta nodded once. In a movement too swift for her eyes to follow, Vittorio swept her into his arms. The world blurred around them as he carried her through a side door and into the Venetian night, moving with supernatural speed through the labyrinthine alleys of the floating city. Elisabetta clung to his coat, face pressed against the cool fabric to shield herself from the dizzying rush of their escape. The air grew saltier as they neared the lagoon, and suddenly they were on a sleek gondola, gliding silently through the dark waters, the city's lights receding behind them. "Where are we going?" she asked when she found her voice again. "To my estate on the mainland," Vittorio replied, steering the gondola with practiced ease. "It has stood for 300 years, hidden from mortal eyes by old magic and older bribes." As they moved through the water, Elisabetta studied her savior more carefully. Though he appeared no older than 35, there was something in his eyes, a depth of experience, a weight of years, that betrayed his true age. "Your wife," she ventured cautiously, "what was her name?" Vittorio was silent for so long that Elisabetta thought he hadn't heard her. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely audible above the gentle lapping of water against the gondola. "Juliana," he said. "Her name was Juliana." The name hung in the air between them like a ghost. "How did she die?" Elisabetta asked, and immediately regretted her boldness. Vittorio's hands tightened on the oar. "She was murdered," he said, his voice hollow, "by those who made me what I am." The implications settled heavily in Elisabetta's mind. "You weren't always a vampire?" "No." His gaze remained fixed on the dark horizon. "I was a count, a mortal nobleman with lands and title. Juliana was the daughter of a rival house. Our marriage ended generations of conflict." A bitter laugh escaped him. "Or so we thought." They passed under a stone bridge, momentarily cast in complete darkness. "There are forces in this world, Elisabetta Conti, that consider themselves gods. Ancient vampires who believe they alone should determine who receives the dark gift." Vittorio's voice hardened. "They deemed me worthy, but thought my love for Juliana made me weak. So they took her from me." "And you've been alone since then?" Elisabetta realized aloud. "For 400 years." Vittorio didn't answer, but his silence was confirmation enough. The gondola slipped silently through a curtain of mist, and suddenly the shoreline materialized before them. A torchlit dock extended from the bank, and beyond it, Elisabetta could make out the silhouette of a magnificent villa nestled against the backdrop of cypress trees. "We have arrived," Vittorio announced, guiding the gondola to the dock. As he helped her from the boat, Elisabetta noticed a figure waiting at the end of the dock, a woman in simple but fine clothing, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. "This is Sofia," Vittorio said. "She oversees the household. She is human, like you, but has served my estate for 40 years. Sofia curtsied stiffly. "My lord, I've prepared the East Wing chambers as requested." "Thank you, Sofia." Vittorio turned to Elisabetta. "Sofia will show you to your rooms and provide whatever you require. Clean clothes, food, bath, you need only ask." "My lord," Sofia interjected, her expression troubled. "There is a matter requiring your immediate attention. A message arrived from Venice by Crow. Vittorio's expression darkened. From whom? The council, Sophia said, her voice dropping to a whisper. They know what happened at the auction house. A muscle twitched in Vittorio's jaw. Take Elisabetta to her chambers. See that she's comfortable. I will deal with this. Before Elisabetta could speak, Vittorio vanished into the mist, leaving her alone with the stern-faced housekeeper. Sophia regarded her with open curiosity. You must be special indeed, she said. The master hasn't brought a guest to the villa in 20 years. Elisabetta wrapped her arms around herself. I'm not special. I just have someone else's eyes. Sophia's expression softened slightly. Come, child, you look half frozen and wholly exhausted. Let's get you warm and fed. As they walked toward the villa, Elisabetta couldn't shake the feeling that she had stepped into a story much larger and more dangerous than she could comprehend. A story that had been unfolding for centuries before her birth, and one that might well consume her before it reached its end. The East Wing chambers were more luxurious than anything Elisabetta had ever seen, let alone inhabited. A large four-poster bed dominated the room, draped with silk hangings of deep burgundy. A fire crackled in the marble fireplace, casting dancing shadows across the ornate furniture and tapestries depicting hunting scenes from a bygone era. These were the Countess's rooms, Sophia said, lighting additional candles. Elisabetta froze. Juliana's? Sophia shook her head. No, child. The master's mother's rooms, from when he was mortal. The Countess Salvatore died long before my time, but these chambers have been maintained exactly as she left them. She moved to a large armoire and opened its doors. I've taken the liberty of placing some suitable garments here. They're old fashions, but of good quality. Thank you, Elisabetta said, running her fingers over the fine fabrics. But I don't understand why Signor Vittorio is doing this. Sophia's lips pressed into a thin line. It's not my place to speculate on the master's motives. She moved to a door at the far end of the room. Through here is a bathing chamber. I'll have hot water brought up immediately. Left alone, Elisabetta sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the night's events. Just hours ago, she had been a prisoner awaiting sale to the highest bidder, certain that her life was forfeit to some nobleman's perverted desires. Now she was the guest of a vampire in a villa that had stood for centuries, wearing the clothes of a long-dead countess, all because her eyes resembled those of a murdered woman. She moved to the window and gazed out at the misty grounds. Somewhere in the darkness, Vittorio was dealing with the consequences of the slaughter he had committed on her behalf. These council members Sophia had mentioned, were they the gods he had spoken of? The ancient vampires who had murdered his wife? A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. A young maid entered, followed by 2 footmen carrying steaming buckets of water. "For your bath, miss," the girl said with a curtsy. "And Sophia sent these up for you." She placed a tray of bread, cheese, and fruit on a small table. Elisabetta thanked her and soon found herself sinking into the hot, scented water of the copper tub, letting it wash away the grime and terror of the past days. As she ate the simple but delicious food afterward, wrapped in a soft robe, she tried to make sense of her situation. Why had Vittorio really saved her? A portrait seemed an insufficient reason for the risk he had taken and the enemies he had made. Perhaps he believed she was Juliana reborn? Or was there some other purpose she couldn't yet fathom? Sleep claimed her as these questions circled in her mind, and she dreamed of blood tears falling like rubies and amber eyes watching from the shadows. She awoke to sunlight filtering through the heavy curtains and the sound of a violin playing somewhere in the distance. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the events of the previous night came rushing back, and she sat up with a start. A dress had been laid out for her, a day gown of pale blue silk, simpler than the formal attire in the armoire, but still finer than anything she had ever worn. After dressing, she cautiously opened her chamber door and followed the sound of the violin. It led her through corridors lined with paintings, down a grand staircase, and into a sun-drenched conservatory at the back of the villa. There, to her surprise, sat Vittorio, drawing a bow across the strings of a violin with his eyes closed, lost in the music. He didn't seem to notice her presence, and Elisabetta took the opportunity to study him in the daylight. His skin was pale, but not the deathly white of legend. He looked almost human, save for a certain stillness when he wasn't moving, as if he were a painting of a man rather than a man himself. The music he played was haunting, filled with longing and grief. It spoke of centuries of solitude, of love lost and never forgotten. When the final note faded, Elisabetta couldn't help but break the silence. "I thought vampires couldn't bear the sunlight," she said. Vittorio opened his eyes, but didn't seem startled by her presence. "Another myth, like so many others. The sun weakens us, makes us more human in our limitations, but it doesn't destroy us." He set the violin down carefully. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I expected," she admitted, taking a tentative step into the conservatory. "Thank you for the clothes and the room." Vittorio nodded. "Sophia will see to anything else you need." He paused, studying her in the morning light. "You look even more like her in the sun." Elisabetta sat in a chair opposite him, smoothing her skirts nervously. "About that portrait you mentioned."
"Ah, yes." Vittorio gestured to an easel set up by the large windows, canvas already prepared. "I thought we might begin today, if you're willing. The morning light in this room is perfect." "You're the artist?" Elisabetta asked, surprised. A small smile touched his lips. "I've had centuries to develop various skills. Music, painting, languages." The smile faded. "Distractions from eternity." "And last night? The council you mentioned?" Vittorio's expression hardened. "That is not your concern." "It became my concern when you slaughtered 12 men to save me," Elisabetta countered. "If I'm in danger here—" "You're safer here than anywhere else in Italy," Vittorio interrupted. "The council cannot enter these grounds uninvited. Ancient laws bind even them." "But they're angry with you." "They have been angry with me for 4 centuries," he said dismissively. "Their disapproval is nothing new." Elisabetta frowned. "Why did you really save me, Signore Vittorio? The truth, please." Vittorio was silent for a long moment, his fingers absently tracing the curves of the violin beside him. "I was in Venice on other business," he finally said. "I heard rumors of a girl with unusual eyes being sold at the underground auction. I attended, out of curiosity, nothing more." His gaze met hers. "Then I saw you, and it was like seeing a ghost." "You think I'm connected to Juliana somehow?" "I don't know what to think," he admitted. "In 400 years, I have never seen eyes exactly like hers. Yet here you are, with the same unusual amber color, the same golden flecks. It could be coincidence, or... Vittorio shook his head. "Superstition, nothing more." He stood and moved to the easel. "Now, if you'll permit me, I would like to begin the portrait. Just sit comfortably and look toward the garden. You needn't hold perfectly still." Elisabetta wanted to press him further, but sensed she would get no more answers for now. She positioned herself as directed, gazing out at the lush gardens visible through the conservatory windows. Vittorio worked in silence for nearly an hour, his brush moving with practiced precision across the canvas. Occasionally, he would glance at her with an intensity that made her both uncomfortable and curious. "May I ask you something?" she ventured finally. "You may ask," he replied, not pausing in his work. "How did you become a vampire? You said you were once mortal." Vittorio's brush hesitated briefly before continuing. "I was turned in 1487, he said, his tone neutral. I was 34 years old, a widower for barely a month. I had spent that month hunting the creatures who killed Juliana, determined to destroy them or die in the attempt. And instead, the leader of the council, Lazarus, found my pursuit amusing. He said a mortal with such determination deserved the gift of immortality." Bitterness crept into Vittorio's voice. He thought it ironic to make me one of them after they had taken everything I loved. "That's cruel," Elisabetta whispered. "Cruelty is their nature," Vittorio replied. "They believe themselves above human morality, above consequences. They style themselves as gods, deciding who lives, who dies, and who joins their ranks." "And you've opposed them all this time?" Vittorio set down his brush and studied her with those ancient eyes. "For the first century, I plotted their destruction with every waking moment. I killed 3 of their number before they contained me." "Contained you?" "A century imprisoned in a stone coffin beneath the Alps," he said matter-of-factly. "They thought it would break me, make me grateful for any freedom they eventually offered." A cold smile crossed his face. They were wrong. Elisabetta shivered despite the warm sunlight. "Yet you survived." "Survival is the only revenge when one cannot die," Vittorio said. "I emerged from that coffin in 1623, and I have spent the centuries since building power, wealth, and knowledge. I play their game when necessary, but I never forget what they took from me." He picked up his brush again. "Enough of ancient history. Tell me of yourself, Elisabetta Conti. How did a tanner's daughter from Firenze end up at a slave auction in Venice?" Elisabetta looked down at her hands. "My father died last winter. Fever took him. I tried to maintain his business, but the guild wouldn't allow a woman to continue the trade." She swallowed hard. "I was apprenticed to a dressmaker, but her son, he had expectations I wasn't willing to meet. When I refused him, he accused me of theft. No one would take my word over his." "So you fled Firenze?" She nodded. "I thought I could find work in Venice. I had an aunt there once, though I wasn't sure if she still lived. I never found her. Instead, I was drugged at an inn where I sought lodging. When I woke, I was in a cell beneath the auction house." Vittorio's expression darkened. "The men I killed deserved worse than they received." "I won't argue with that," Elisabetta said softly. "But it still frightens me how easily you took their lives. When you have lived as long as I have, you learn that some men forfeit their right to exist by their actions." Vittorio turned back to his canvas. "I have killed many over the centuries, Elisabetta. Some deserved it, some did not. I make no excuses for what I am." A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the soft sound of brush against canvas. Elisabetta found herself studying the vampire as he worked, noting the intensity of his concentration, the graceful movements of his hands. Despite his cold words, there was something deeply human about his focus on his art. "You loved her very much, didn't you?" she asked suddenly. "Juliana?" Vittorio's hand stilled. "More than life itself," he answered quietly. "More than my soul, which I surrendered willingly in my quest for vengeance. And in 400 years there has been no one else?" A shadow passed over his face. Immortality is lonely, Elisabetta. I have had companions, brief connections across the centuries. But love? He shook his head. That died with her. Before Elisabetta could respond, Sophia appeared at the conservatory entrance. "Forgive the interruption, my lord, but there is a visitor at the gate." Vittorio frowned. "Who?" "Lady Magdalena Visconti," Sophia replied, her tone carefully neutral. Vittorio set down his brush with deliberate calm. "I see. Show her to the library. I will join her shortly." As Sophia departed, Elisabetta noticed the tension in Vittorio's shoulders. "Who is Lady Magdalena?" "A complication," he replied tersely, "and a member of the council." Fear clutched at Elisabetta's heart. "They've come for you? For what you did at the auction?" "For that and much more." Vittorio covered the portrait with a cloth. "Return to your chambers, Elisabetta. Do not leave them until I come for you." "But if they mean to harm you?" "Magdalena comes alone, which means she wishes to negotiate, not fight." Vittorio's expression softened slightly at Elisabetta's obvious concern. "I have played this game for centuries, child. Trust that I know the rules." Though reluctant, Elisabetta nodded and made her way back to her rooms. As she climbed the grand staircase, she couldn't shake the feeling that Vittorio was hiding something important from her, something beyond his grief for his long-dead wife or his enmity with the council, something that had everything to do with her eyes and the strange coincidence that had brought her into his world. From her chamber window, Elisabetta watched as a sleek black carriage departed through the villa's gates 2 hours later. The woman inside, presumably Lady Magdalena, had remained invisible behind curtained windows, but Elisabetta had glimpsed Vittorio walking her to the carriage, his posture formal and distant. When he returned to the house, Elisabetta waited, expecting him to come to her chambers as promised. Instead, silence settled over the villa like a shroud. As evening approached, she grew restless and decided to seek him out herself. The villa was cavernous, with numerous corridors and chambers, many closed off or dusty with disuse. Eventually, she found herself before a heavy wooden door in the west wing, slightly ajar, with flickering light visible within. She pushed the door open to reveal a vast library. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, crammed with books, scrolls, and manuscripts from every era. Star charts and maps covered one wall, while ancient weapons and strange artifacts adorned another. At the center of the room, hunched over a massive desk littered with open books, sat Vittorio. He didn't look up as she entered. "I told you to remain in your chambers," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "That was hours ago," Elisabetta replied, stepping further into the library. "What did Lady Magdalena want?" Vittorio finally raised his head. In the candlelight, his face appeared more gaunt than before, his eyes haunted. "She delivered a message from the council. I am summoned to Venice tomorrow night to answer for my actions." "And if you refuse?" "Then they will come here in force," he said simply. "And while my estate is protected by old magic, even I cannot stand against the full might of the council." Elisabetta approached the desk cautiously. "What will happen to you?" "Punishment, most likely. Another century in the coffin, perhaps?" He shrugged with forced nonchalance. "It matters little." "It matters to me," Elisabetta said, surprising herself with the vehemence in her voice. "You saved my life. I won't let you suffer for it." A bitter laugh escaped Vittorio. "And how would you stop them, child? The youngest of the council is 300 years old. The oldest, Lazarus, has seen 2 millennia pass." Elisabetta glanced at the books spread before him. You're looking for something. A weapon against them? Information, Vittorio corrected, about reincarnation. The word hung in the air between them, laden with implication. You think I'm her? Elisabetta whispered. Juliana reborn? Vittorio's expression was unreadable. I don't know what to think. For centuries, I have studied the mysteries of life and death, searching for any sign of her. There are texts that speak of souls returning, of old spirits finding new vessels. He gestured to an ancient tome with yellowed pages. The Egyptians believed in it, so did the Druids and certain Buddhist sects. But I have my own life, my own memories, Elisabetta protested. I am not Juliana. Of course you're not, Vittorio agreed readily. You are Elisabetta Conti, with your own soul and spirit. And yet, he trailed off, staring at her with that same haunted look. Those eyes, the precise shade that I have sought for 400 years. It cannot be mere coincidence. Elisabetta felt a chill run through her. What aren't you telling me? Lady Magdalena's visit wasn't just about the auction house, was it? Vittorio was silent for a long moment. Then, with a sigh that seemed to come from the depths of his soul, he reached into his coat and withdrew a small portrait miniature, no larger than his palm. He placed it on the desk between them. This is Juliana, he said softly. With trembling fingers, Elisabetta picked up the miniature. The painting was exquisite, clearly the work of a master from the Renaissance. It depicted a young woman of perhaps 20, with dark hair and delicate features. But what made Elisabetta's breath catch was the eyes. Amber with golden flecks, exactly like her own.
The resemblance was so uncanny that it might have been a portrait of Elisabetta herself. "This is impossible," she whispered. "So I thought, until I saw you at the auction," Vittorio said. "The council has also noticed the resemblance. That was Magdalena's true purpose in coming here, to confirm what they had heard." "Why would they care?" Vittorio's expression darkened. "Because Juliana's return was prophesied." "What prophecy?" "Before she died, Juliana was more than just my wife," Vittorio said slowly. "She was a seer with the gift of true vision. The council murdered her, not just to punish me, but because she prophesied their downfall." He met Elisabetta's stunned gaze. "She said she would return when the comet passes, and with her, the power to destroy the council would be revealed." "A comet?" Elisabetta echoed. "Visible in the night sky for the past month," Vittorio confirmed. "The same comet that appeared the week Juliana was murdered." Elisabetta set the miniature down with shaking hands. "This is madness. I'm a tanner's daughter from Firenze, not some reborn prophetess." "I believe you," Vittorio said gently, "but the council will not be so easily convinced. To them, you represent a threat, the fulfillment of a prophecy that has haunted them for centuries." "Is that why you saved me? To use me against them?" Pain flashed across Vittorio's face. "No, I saved you because I couldn't bear to see those eyes, her eyes, filled with fear. Whether you are connected to Juliana or not, I acted on instinct, nothing more." "And now?" Elisabetta demanded. "What happens to me when you go to Venice tomorrow night?" "You will remain here, under Sophia's protection," Vittorio said. "The estate's defenses will hold until my return, if I return." "And if you don't?" Vittorio opened a drawer in the desk and removed a sealed letter. "This contains directions to a convent in the Alps. The abbess there is an old acquaintance. She will protect you." Elisabetta stared at the letter, then back at Vittorio. There must be another way, if we flee now. There is no escape from the council, Vittorio interrupted. I have tried. For now, our best hope is that I can convince them you are nothing more than an extraordinary coincidence. Will they believe that? No, he admitted, but it may buy us time to discover the truth. Elisabetta felt as though she were drowning, pulled beneath the surface of a reality she had never known existed. Vampires, prophecies, reincarnation. It was too much to comprehend. And yet, when she looked at the miniature of Juliana, something deep within her responded to that face, those eyes so identical to her own. "Let me come with you," she said suddenly. Vittorio's eyes widened. Absolutely not. If this prophecy concerns me, then I should face the council myself, Elisabetta insisted. I'm not afraid. You should be, Vittorio said darkly. The council has existed since before the birth of Christ. They have powers you cannot imagine. So do you, Elisabetta countered. I saw what you did at the auction house. That was nothing, Vittorio dismissed. Party tricks compared to the abilities of the ancient ones. Elisabetta stepped closer to him, her resolve hardening. If I am somehow connected to Juliana, then this is my fight too. And if I'm not, if this is all just a cosmic jest, then I still owe you a debt for saving my life. Vittorio studied her with those ancient eyes. You remind me of her in more than just appearance, he said softly. She had the same stubborn courage. Then let me help you. After a long moment, Vittorio nodded slowly. Very well. But you will do exactly as I say, without question. The slightest misstep in the council's presence could be fatal. I understand. I doubt that you do, Vittorio said grimly. But you will. He gestured to the books spread before him. Now, if you truly wish to help, let us continue this research. If there is any truth to the connection between you and Juliana, we must discover it before we face the council. Through the night they worked, poring over ancient texts on reincarnation, prophecies, and the secret histories of the vampire clans. Vittorio translated passages from languages long dead, explaining the complex politics and rivalries of the immortal world. Elisabetta learned that the council consisted of 7 ancient vampires, each the progenitor of a distinct bloodline. Lazarus, the eldest, claimed to have walked the earth since the time of the pharaohs. His word was law among their kind, his power almost godlike. And Juliana predicted his downfall? Elisabetta asked as dawn approached. More than that, Vittorio replied, his voice low, as though fearful of being overheard even in his own home. She said the 7th star would fall from the heavens when her eyes looked upon it again. The council interpreted this to mean Lazarus himself would be destroyed, as he is the 7th and most powerful among them. But you don't believe that's what the prophecy meant? Vittorio hesitated. Juliana's visions were rarely literal. They required interpretation, and even she didn't always understand their meaning. As the first light of dawn crept through the library windows, Vittorio closed the book before him. We should rest. The journey to Venice begins at sunset. Elisabetta nodded, exhaustion finally claiming her. As she rose to return to her chambers, she paused. One last question. The portrait you wanted to paint of me, was it just an excuse to keep me here? No, Vittorio said, his expression softening. I truly wished to capture your likeness, to preserve this moment in time, whatever it may signify. He glanced at the miniature of Juliana. Perhaps, when this is over, we will have the chance to complete it. I would like that, Elisabetta said, and was surprised to find she meant it. As she made her way through the silent villa, dawn breaking over the distant mountains, Elisabetta felt a strange sense of purpose settle over her. Whether by cosmic design or mere chance, she had been drawn into Vittorio's centuries-old conflict. Tonight, they would face the council together and perhaps discover the truth about her connection to a woman dead for 400 years. And perhaps, she thought as sleep claimed her, they would both find the answers they sought in the amber eyes that had brought them together across the centuries. The journey to Venice began at sunset, as promised. Vittorio had arranged for a swift black carriage pulled by 4 horses that seemed unnaturally strong and fast. Elisabetta, dressed in a gown of deep green velvet that Sophia had altered to fit her, sat across from the vampire as they raced through the deepening twilight. "The council will be expecting my presence, but not yours," Vittorio explained. "Your appearance will unsettle them. Use that to your advantage. Speak only when spoken to, and reveal nothing of yourself unless I indicate it is safe to do so." "Where will this meeting take place?" Elisabetta asked, trying to keep her voice steady despite her growing apprehension. "The Palazzo Notturno, the Night Palace," Vittorio replied. "A fortress disguised as a nobleman's residence on one of Venice's smaller islands. It has been their stronghold since the fall of Byzantium." Elisabetta gazed out the window at the darkening landscape. "If they are so powerful, why do they hide? Why not rule openly?" "Because true power thrives in shadow," Vittorio said. "Throughout history, they have preferred to manipulate rather than dominate. Kings, emperors, popes, all have been their puppets at various times. Even now, half the nobility of Europe unknowingly serves their interests. And what of you? Where do you stand in their hierarchy?" A bitter smile crossed Vittorio's face. "I am an anomaly. Too powerful to ignore, too dangerous to destroy, and too rebellious to trust. I exist outside their carefully structured order, a reminder of their fallibility." He studied her in the dim light of the carriage lantern. "Much like you may be, if Juliana's prophecy holds true." The carriage fell silent as they continued their journey. Elisabetta found herself watching Vittorio, noting how still he became when not speaking, as if conserving energy. Occasionally his gaze would meet hers, and she would glimpse something in those ancient eyes, a vulnerability beneath the cold exterior that he presented to the world. "May I ask about Juliana?" she ventured. "Not the prophecy, but her, who she was." Vittorio seemed surprised by the request. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "She was the daughter of the Count de' Medici, a distant cousin of the main branch. We were betrothed as children to end a territorial dispute, but when we met as adults," his voice softened with the memory, "she was unlike anyone I had ever known. Brilliant, stubborn, kind. She read astronomy and philosophy when most women were taught only household management. She spoke 5 languages and could debate theology with bishops." "You loved her mind, not just her beauty," Elisabetta observed. "Her mind, her spirit, her compassion, everything about her." Vittorio's gaze turned distant. "She changed me. Before her, I was simply another nobleman concerned with wealth and status. She made me see beyond the petty concerns of mortal life." "How ironic, then, that you became immortal after losing her." Vittorio's eyes refocused on Elisabetta with an intensity that made her shiver. "More than ironic, it was deliberate cruelty. Lazarus believed that by making me immortal, he was condemning me to an eternity of grief. Yet you persevered. For vengeance at first, then out of spite," his voice hardened, "and finally for the slim hope that Juliana's prophecy might one day be fulfilled." The carriage began to slow as they approached the outskirts of Venice. Ahead, the city rose from the lagoon like a dream, towers and domes silhouetted against the night sky,
lanterns reflecting in the dark waters. "We go by boat from here," Vittorio said, helping Elisabetta from the carriage. "The mainland entrance to the city will be watched." A sleek black gondola awaited them at a small private dock. The gondolier, a silent figure in a hooded cloak, bowed deeply as they approached. "Bernardo has served me for 20 years," Vittorio explained in a low voice. "He is loyal and discreet." As they glided through the dark waters of the lagoon, Venice loomed larger before them, its reflection shimmering like a parallel city beneath the surface. Elisabetta found herself both awed by its beauty and terrified of what awaited them within its labyrinthine canals. "Whatever happens tonight," Vittorio said, breaking the silence, "remember that the council fears you as much as you fear them. The prophecy is their weakness. Use it if you must." "How can I use something I don't understand?" Elisabetta whispered. Vittorio reached across the gondola and, for the first time since their meeting, took her hand in his. His touch was cool but not cold, and strangely comforting. "Trust your instincts," he said. "If you are connected to Juliana in any way, the answers may come when you need them most." The gondola slipped silently through the narrow canals, passing beneath stone bridges and alongside crumbling palazzos. Few people were about at this hour, and those who were paid no attention to the black vessel moving like a shadow through the city. Finally, they approached a small island separated from the main city by a channel of dark water. A palazzo rose from its center, all gleaming marble and Gothic arches. Unlike the other buildings they had passed, every window of this one blazed with light, as if in defiance of the night. "Palazzo Notturno," Vittorio murmured. "Home of the Seven." As they neared the water gate of the palazzo, Elisabetta noticed figures standing guard, unnaturally still, their eyes reflecting the torchlight like those of cats. "Vampires," she realized, her heart racing. "Remember," Vittorio whispered as the gondola drew alongside the marble steps, "speak only when spoken to, show neither fear nor defiance, and whatever you see or hear, do not let it provoke you to action." Elisabetta nodded, her mouth too dry for speech. As Vittorio helped her from the gondola, she felt as though she were stepping not just into a palace, but into the heart of an ancient and terrible power. The guards bowed to Vittorio with formal respect that did not reach their predatory eyes. One of them, a tall woman with copper-colored hair, spoke in a language Elisabetta did not recognize, harsh and sibilant like the hissing of snakes. Vittorio replied in the same tongue, his voice cool and commanding. Then, taking Elisabetta's arm, he led her through the water gate and into the palazzo. The entrance hall was cavernous, its ceiling lost in shadow, despite the dozens of chandeliers that hung throughout the space. The walls were adorned with tapestries and paintings depicting scenes of conquest and glory, many so ancient their colors had faded to ghostly echoes of their former brilliance. And everywhere there were vampires. Some lounged on divans or engaged in quiet conversation, while others stood in formal groups, observing the newcomers with open curiosity. All were beautiful in a cold, terrible way, their features too perfect to be human, their movements too graceful. "Vittorio di Monte Carlo," announced a voice from the grand staircase. "At last you grace us with your presence." A woman descended the stairs, her gown of crimson silk flowing around her like liquid blood. Her skin was white as alabaster, her hair as black as midnight, and her lips stained the same deep red as her dress. Though she appeared no older than 30, her eyes held the weight of centuries. "Lady Magdalena," Vittorio acknowledged with a slight bow, "I believe we had an appointment." Magdalena's gaze shifted to Elisabetta, her expression hardening. "And you bring the girl. How provocative of you!" "She is under my protection," Vittorio said, simply. "Is she indeed?" Magdalena circled them slowly, her movements reminiscent of a predator assessing its prey. "The council will be most interested to meet this protégé of yours." "I'm sure they will," Vittorio replied, his tone neutral despite the tension Elisabetta could feel in his arm beneath her hand. Magdalena stopped directly before Elisabetta, studying her with unnerving intensity. "Such remarkable eyes," she murmured, "exactly as described in our histories." She reached out as if to touch Elisabetta's face. Vittorio stepped forward slightly, placing himself between them. "The council awaits, I believe." A flash of annoyance crossed Magdalena's perfect features. "Indeed. Follow me." She led them up the grand staircase and through a series of opulent chambers, each more lavishly decorated than the last. Vampires watched their progress from doorways and alcoves, whispering among themselves as they passed. Finally, they arrived at a set of massive doors carved with scenes of celestial bodies. The sun, moon, planets, and stars arranged in complex patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. "The Chamber of 7 Stars," Vittorio murmured to Elisabetta, "the heart of their power." The doors swung open silently, revealing a circular room with a domed ceiling painted to resemble the night sky. 7 thrones, each carved from a different material, stood in a semicircle upon a raised dais. 5 were occupied by figures as varied as they were terrible. An ancient man with skin like parchment, a woman of ethereal beauty with eyes of solid gold, a giant of a man with tribal scarification covering his dark skin, a delicate youth with the serene face of a Renaissance angel, and a figure whose features were concealed behind an ornate silver mask. "The Council of 7, Magdalena announced, taking her place on a throne of obsidian. "Assembled to judge the actions of Vittorio di Montecarlo, who has violated our laws and shed blood in public view." 1 throne remained empty, the central seat carved from a material that resembled crystal but emanated a faint blue glow. "Where is Lazarus?" Vittorio asked, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "Our Lord will join us presently," replied the Ancient One, his voice a dry whisper. "He has been disturbed by recent events." "I can imagine," Vittorio said with the barest hint of satisfaction. The masked figure leaned forward. "You bring the girl with eyes of amber and gold." The voice was androgynous, neither male nor female, with an accent Elisabetta couldn't place. "Bold, even for you, Vittorio." "She witnessed the events at the auction house," Vittorio replied smoothly. "I thought it only fair she be present when you pass judgment for actions taken on her behalf." "Is that the only reason?" asked the golden-eyed woman, her tone skeptical. Before Vittorio could answer, the air in the chamber seemed to thicken, as if a storm were brewing within the room itself. The empty throne began to glow more intensely, and the vampires on the council straightened in their seats, their expressions a mixture of reverence and fear. "Lazarus comes," whispered Magdalena. A swirl of mist formed before the crystal throne, coalescing slowly into the figure of a man. He was tall and gaunt, with features that might have been handsome in a mortal, but seemed wrong somehow on his immortal face, as if the passage of millennia had stretched his skin too thin over the bones beneath. His eyes were the blue of Arctic ice, ancient and merciless. "Vittorio," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle for one so clearly feared. My wayward child, you continue to disappoint me. Vittorio offered a bow that was just short of insulting in its brevity. My Lord Lazarus, you continue to overestimate my desire for your approval. A ripple of shock passed through the watching vampires at this disrespect, but Lazarus merely smiled, revealing teeth too sharp to be human. And this, he said, turning his arctic gaze to Elisabetta, must be the girl who has caused such a stir among our kind, the one with Juliana's eyes. Elisabetta forced herself to meet that terrible gaze, though every instinct screamed at her to look away, to run, to hide from the ancient malevolence she saw there. "My name is Elisabetta Conti," she said, her voice steadier than she had expected. "She speaks," Lazarus observed with mock surprise. "How charming." He returned his attention to Vittorio. "You have broken our most sacred law, the prohibition against revealing our nature to mortals through public violence. 12 men dead, witnesses fled in terror. The human authorities search even now for the monster responsible." "Those men were slavers," Vittorio replied coldly. "They violated human laws far more grievously than I violated yours." "That is not for you to judge," hissed the Ancient One. "Yet you sit in judgment of me," Vittorio countered. "Hypocritical, don't you think?" The youth with the angelic face laughed suddenly, a sound like silver bells. "He has you there, Osiris. We have always been selective about which laws we choose to enforce." "Silence, Magdalena. This is not a matter for amusement." Lazarus raised a hand, and the chamber fell silent. "The law is clear, as is the punishment. 100 years imprisoned to contemplate the error of your ways." His thin lips curved in a cruel smile. "A familiar sentence for you, I believe." Vittorio's expression remained impassive, but Elisabetta felt him tense beside her. "And what of the girl?" asked the masked figure. "She knows our secrets now." "Indeed, Nix," Lazarus mused, studying Elisabetta with renewed interest. "What shall we do with you, child?" "She is under my protection," Vittorio stated firmly. "Your protection means nothing here," Magdalena said dismissively. "You stand condemned already. The law provides for clemency in cases of extreme provocation," Vittorio argued. "The girl was to be sold as a slave, an institution this council has officially opposed since the 18th century. "A convenient interpretation," said the giant with the scarified face, his deep voice resonant in the chamber. "But technically correct, Kofi," Raphael pointed out. "We did declare the slave trade anathema to our interests after the incident in Haiti." "This is irrelevant," Lazarus interrupted. "The true matter before us is not the deaths of a few insignificant humans, or even Vittorio's flagrant disregard for our laws." His gaze fixed on Elisabetta with frightening intensity. "It is the fulfillment of a prophecy 4 centuries in the making." A heavy silence fell over the chamber. "There is no proof she is connected to Juliana or her prophecy," Vittorio said carefully. "The resemblance of her eyes may be mere coincidence." "Coincidence?" Lazarus laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "The same amber eyes with flecks of gold? The timing of her appearance as the comet returns to the sky? Your own reaction when you first saw her?" He shook his head. "No, Vittorio. Even you do not believe that." "What would you have me say?" Vittorio demanded. "That I found her by divine providence? That she is Juliana reborn? I make no such claim." "Yet you brought her here," Lazarus observed. to the very heart of our power. Why, I wonder? To argue for her freedom, Vittorio replied evenly. She is an innocent in this conflict between us. There are no innocents in prophecy, said the golden-eyed woman. Only players assigned their roles by fate. Elisabetta, who had remained silent throughout this exchange, finally spoke. What exactly did this prophecy say? If it concerns me, should I not know its contents? All eyes turned to her, some surprised, others calculating. She has spirit, Raphael remarked with approval, like her predecessor. She is not Juliana, Vittorio insisted. Perhaps not in body or memory, Lazarus conceded, but the soul, that is another matter. He rose from his throne, a movement so fluid it seemed he was floating rather than walking as he descended to the floor of the chamber. Come here, child. Let me look upon these famous eyes more closely. Elisabetta glanced at Vittorio, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Gathering her courage, she stepped forward to meet the ancient vampire. Lazarus circled her slowly, his gaze penetrating. When he stood before her again, he reached out one pale hand and lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes directly. "Remarkable," he murmured, "identical in every detail." His touch was cold as the grave, sending shivers of revulsion through Elisabetta. "I remember those eyes well, child. I watched the light fade from them 400 years ago as Juliana de Medici breathed her last." Anger flared within Elisabetta at the casual cruelty of his words. "You murdered her," she said, unable to keep the accusation from her voice. A ripple of murmurs ran through the council at her boldness. "I executed her," Lazarus corrected, unperturbed by her accusation. "For sedition against this council and for practicing forbidden arts." His cold smile returned. "The distinction is important legally, if not morally." "And now you fear her prophecy?" Elisabetta pressed, emboldened by his admission. "You fear that I might somehow fulfill it?" Lazarus' smile faded. "Fear is a mortal weakness, child. We do not fear. We calculate, we plan, we eliminate threats before they manifest." He released her chin and stepped back. Juliana's last words were clear. "When the comet returns and my eyes look upon it again, the seventh star will fall from heaven." Poetry, perhaps, but we take such utterances seriously when they come from a seer of her power. "I am no seer," Elisabetta insisted. "I have no visions, no powers. I'm a tanner's daughter from Firenze, nothing more." "Are you?" Lazarus studied her thoughtfully. "Tell me, child, have you ever experienced moments of knowing things you should not? Dreamed events before they occurred? Felt drawn to places or people without understanding why?" Elisabetta hesitated, unwilling to admit that she had indeed experienced such things throughout her life. Intuitions too accurate to be coincidence, dreams too vivid to be mere fancy. Her hesitation was answer enough for Lazarus. "I thought as much," he said with satisfaction. "The gift often manifests differently in each life, but it is never truly lost." "Enough of this," Vittorio interrupted, stepping forward. "Whatever Elisabetta may or may not be, she has committed no crime against your laws. She deserves her freedom." "Freedom?" Lazarus laughed again. "There is no freedom in prophecy, Vittorio. You, of all people, should know this." He returned to his throne, settling upon it with regal grace. "The council will deliberate on both your fates. Until then, you will remain our guests." He gestured to the guards stationed at the door. "Show them to the azure chambers. Ensure they are comfortable and secure." As the guards moved to escort them from the chamber, Lazarus added, Oh, and Vittorio, do not attempt any heroics. The palazzo is warded against your particular talents, and I would hate to add attempted escape to your list of transgressions. Vittorio's expression remained impassive, but Elisabetta could sense his frustration and concern as they were led from the chamber and through a maze of corridors to a suite of rooms decorated in various shades of blue and silver. "What happens now?" she whispered, as the heavy door closed behind them, the sound of a key turning in the lock echoing with finality. Vittorio moved to the windows, which offered a view of Venice's Grand Canal and the city beyond. "Now," he said grimly, "we wait for them to decide our fate and hope that the prophecy Lazarus fears so greatly gives us leverage to negotiate. And if it doesn't?" Vittorio turned to her, his ancient eyes filled with a determination that both frightened and reassured her. "Then we discover whether Giuliana's vision truly spoke of liberation or destruction." The azure chambers, despite being a prison, were luxurious beyond anything Elisabetta had ever experienced. The walls were hung with silk the color of a summer sky, the furniture carved from pale wood and upholstered in silver brocade. A table laden with food and wine had been set for her, a reminder that, unlike her immortal companion, she required mortal sustenance. Vittorio paced the chamber like a caged predator, his movements becoming increasingly agitated as the hours passed. "There must be a way out of here," he muttered, running his hands along the walls as if searching for hidden passages. "You've escaped from worse," Elisabetta observed, picking at the food without much appetite. "A century in a coffin beneath the Alps, you said." Vittorio paused in his examination of a bookcase. "That was different. I had help from an unexpected quarter, a rival of Lazarus who saw political advantage in my release. And now, do you have allies on the council?" "Raphael, perhaps," Vittorio admitted. "He is the youngest of them, turned only 500 years ago."
He finds Lazarus's obsession with the prophecy tiresome. He resumed his pacing. But Raphael alone cannot stand against the others, especially Lazarus. Elisabetta set down her wineglass, a thought occurring to her. This prophecy, the seventh star falling from heaven, Lazarus assumes it refers to himself, as he is the seventh and most powerful of the council. But what if that's not what it means? Vittorio stopped, regarding her with sudden interest. "Go on." "Stars fall from heaven in many ways," Elisabetta reasoned, "not just through destruction or death. Sometimes they fall to earth by choice, like the angels in religious texts. Or like meteors during a comet's passing," Vittorio added, understanding dawning in his eyes. The prophecy could be speaking of transformation, not destruction. "Exactly," Elisabetta said, warming to the theory. "What if—" She was interrupted by the sound of the key turning in the lock. The door swung open to reveal Raphael, the youthful vampire from the council, standing alone in the corridor. "Discussing escape plans?" he asked with a mischievous smile. "I expected nothing less from you, Vittorio." "Merely passing the time," Vittorio replied cautiously. "Has the council reached a decision?" Raphael entered the chamber, closing the door behind him. "Not officially. They continue to debate your punishment and the girl's fate." He moved to the window, gazing out at the pre-dawn sky. "But I thought you might like to know that Lazarus has already made his own arrangements." "What arrangements?" Vittorio demanded. Raphael turned, his boyish face suddenly serious. "He plans to execute the girl at sunset tomorrow, publicly, before the assembled vampires of Venice. A demonstration that prophecies can be defied and fate controlled." Elisabetta felt her blood turn cold.
But Vittorio's reaction was explosive. In a blur of movement, he had Raphael pinned against the wall, his hand at the younger vampire's throat. "Why tell us this?" Vittorio growled.
To torment us with knowledge we cannot use? Raphael, despite his precarious position, remained calm. "I have my own reasons for opposing Lazarus," he said. "His obsession with this prophecy has consumed the council for centuries, distracting us from more important matters." His eyes flickered to Elisabetta. "And I find the idea of executing an innocent distasteful, regardless of whose eyes she may possess." Vittorio released him slowly. "What game are you playing, Raphael?" "The long game, my friend." Raphael straightened his elegant coat. "Lazarus has ruled for 2 millennia through fear and manipulation. Some of us believe it may be time for new leadership." "A coup?" Vittorio said flatly. "And you want me to be your instrument?" Raphael smiled, revealing the tips of his fangs. "You have always been a wild card, Vittorio. Unpredictable, powerful, driven by your own code rather than our laws." He gestured to Elisabetta. "And now, it seems, you may hold the key to fulfilling a prophecy that has haunted our kind for generations." "I will not be used as a pawn in your political games," Vittorio warned. "Not a pawn, an ally," Raphael corrected. "I offer you both freedom and the chance for the vengeance you have sought for 4 centuries." He moved to the door. "The choice is yours, of course. But consider this. Sunset is less than 18 hours away, and Lazarus preparations are already underway." With that, he departed, the lock clicking shut behind him. "Can we trust him?" Elisabetta asked once they were alone. Vittorio's expression was grim. "Raphael serves his own interests first and always. But in this case, his interests may align with ours." He resumed his pacing, more determined now. "The question is whether his assistance will be enough to overcome Lazarus's power." "What power does Lazarus have, exactly?" Elisabetta asked. "You've spoken of the council's abilities, but not specifically of his." Vittorio hesitated, as if reluctant to give voice to his knowledge. "Lazarus is different from other vampires," he finally said. "Legend holds that he was not turned by another of our kind, but transformed through an ancient ritual, a bargain with entities beyond our understanding." "Demons?" Elisabetta asked, her Catholic upbringing surfacing.